I've been researching true crime for a while now and watching true crime for even longer, so it's rare that I find something that truly horrifies me. Today's case is one I knew basic details about before researching it, but the more I dived into this rabbit hole, the more shocked and sickened I became. The murder victim was living a life of casual work, low-level crime, and really just fumbling through life. But he enjoyed spending time with his friends and was generally happy with his lot in life. It's when he fell in with a new group of friends that things drastically changed, with his life ending after being tortured over several weeks until, when his body could no longer take it, he died and was dumped on waste ground and not found for several weeks. This is Murder of Crows.
Say that you're ready, but you won't like it. You say that you're ready, but you won't like it. Silence all the crows.
James Jimmy Prout was the sixth of 8 children born in Newcastle. His father worked away from home a lot, and his mother struggled with so many children to take care of on her own. As a result of her struggles, most of the children, including Jimmy, spent time in the care system. Not much is noted of his life growing up, indicating his life was ordinary and unremarkable compared to his peers. He was illiterate, but he did develop a relationship with a lady called Mandy Carter. The couple had 2 children together, but they had long separated before Prout began something of a life of homelessness, a bit of a drifter. It seems that he had a relatively low IQ and was troubled by the trap that many from poverty-stricken backgrounds fall into, that being addiction, and especially an addiction to alcohol, to try to escape from the difficulties of life. So by the early 2000s, Jimmy was known as a social and friendly person, but also as a vulnerable one who was easily led and could easily be taken advantage of. He was a regular user of homelessness services like soup kitchens, where he was well liked. Unfortunately, it was at these services that he met a man who, despite having a settled address, would use and abuse these services. Evidently a man keen to get something for nothing and feeling a sense of entitlement to anything he could get. This man, named Zahid Zaman, befriended Jimmy Prout, and Jimmy became integrated into Zaman's inner circle, which consisted of 3 women, all of whom had been in relationships with Zaman at one time or another, and over whom Zaman appeared to have a level of control. These women were Anne Corbett, Myra Wood, and Kay Rayworth. Rayworth had acquired a property at 75 St. Stephen's Way. Now this street becomes central to the horrible events we will discuss in a little time. And she got this property in 2007, and Prout starts to live as a tenant at this address. So it becomes even more enmeshed with the peculiar foursome. People who knew of them around this time describes Zaman treating Prout as something of an underling or a lackey. But it didn't seem that this caused Jimmy any distress, as he just enjoyed spending time with people and was not known to question people's reasons or any sort of group hierarchy. He was happy to just go with the flow. Now the group were known to cause issues for the residents of the area of Percy, Maine in North Shields, but as far as I could find, this never progressed to needing police involvement. It seems Jimmy began a relationship with Ann Corbett, who was 25 at the time, and moved into her home, where her brother Ivan Corbett also lived at the time. Now, it was in 2015 that things seemed to change within the group, and Jimmy was noted to attend North Tyneside General Hospital on the 27th of November with a range of injuries and severe bruising over most of his body. Dr. Martin Anfield treated him and would later testify that Jimmy had said that he had been punched, kicked and beaten with a baseball bat. But as far as I could tell, this was not passed on to other services. As is often the case with drawn out cases like this, what happened over the next few weeks is open to conjecture and has to be pieced together from information and investigations after the fact. But it seems that following his hospital visit, Jimmy continued to be part of the gang, which many people who knew of them likened more to a cult. But given that the information of what actually happened was almost reverse engineered after the fact, what I'm going to do now is effectively jump to the end and look at the discoveries as they happened and how they came to deduce and piece together what had actually happened. So on the 27th of March 2016, at around 3:30 in the afternoon, the body of a man was discovered wrapped in sleeping bags on waste ground near the A187, not far from the Tyne Tunnel. It seems the man had been dead for around 6 weeks, with part of the reason for the time taken to find the body being that the green sleeping bags were camouflaged within the trees and the bushes. The body had significant decomposition and had been partly eaten by wildlife. But despite this, any attempt to disguise the death as simple misadventure of a homeless man living in the wild was soon dashed, with the medical examiner noting that the man's scrotum had been cut open and one testicle removed, as well as having teeth missing and showing signs of several recent beatings, indicating the man had suffered an extended period of torture prior to his death. The body, as I'm sure you've gathered, was eventually identified as Jimmy Prout. Now, Jimmy had gone missing in early February of 2016, as had his partner Ann Corbett. Now, Corbett was soon located in nearby Durham, but Jimmy Prout was still missing. Even though he had not been seen by anyone for over a month, regular withdrawals had still been taken from his account. fueling suspicion that he had disappeared by choice. But when the CCTV from the cash machines was looked at, Jimmy himself was never seen. Now, one of the most vocal in the search for Jimmy was his close friend Zahid Zaman. Now, Zaman used a motorized wheelchair following a car accident. But most who knew him, especially those who had experienced his violent temper, believed he was far more able than he wanted people to believe. He also claimed to have ties to organized gangs and was extremely possessive and controlling of the women he surrounded himself with. While Jimmy was seen as sometimes annoying but largely harmless and helpful to those in need, Zaman had a reputation as an aggressive bully, but maintained he was concerned for his missing friend Jimmy. After the discovery of Jimmy's body, the lives of Prout's closest friends, those being Zaman and his ladies, came under the microscope, and it soon became clear that they were the ones taking the money from Jimmy's bank account. Now, further investigation of the quartet soon led to CCTV from the area where they lived being discovered, and the footage began to tell a chilling story of a vulnerable man being severely abused. And I will show some of this CCTV in a little while. But he was seen on numerous occasions being pulled, pushed, or otherwise cajoled through the local area. During this time, if Prout had any appointments, he would never attend them alone. And those accompanying him, later identified as one or more members of Zaman's gang, would speak on his behalf. As is the case with many instances of multiple perpetrators, as the net closed in on the group, the gang members started to turn on each other, with Zaman himself actually calling the police and blaming Corbett for attacking him and killing Jimmy, fully expecting Corbett, who he thought to be under his control, to take full responsibility for what had happened. Now, all four were arrested, initially for perverting the course of justice while the investigation continued. Zaman and Corbett were ultimately charged with Jimmy Prout's murder. The true scale of the torture was revealed at the 2017 trial, and as well as extremely severe beatings, which Prout himself sometimes evidenced on his Facebook account, it seems that Prout's scrotum was cut open with a Stanley knife, one of his testicles was removed and dropped in water before Prout was forced to eat it. It was thought that Anne Corbett was responsible for this particular aspect of the torture. The missing teeth that Prout also showed on Facebook, alongside the achingly sorrowful but succinct caption, "Mouth hurt," were apparently removed with a hammer and chisel. While Prout was also forced to have sex with a dog before his body eventually gave up and he died on or around the 9th of February. The gang were thought to have created a bonfire around this time, presumably to try to get rid of evidence, but traces of Jimmy Prout's blood were still found on Corbett's shoes. CCTV footage also shows what they believe to be Prout's corpse, wrapped in sleeping bags, being taken from the property in a wheelchair. Whatever the minutiae of levels of responsibility, all four, Zaman, Corbett, Wood and Rayworth, were all aware of what was happening, and none of them did anything to stop it.
This investigation commenced in March 2016 when we received a 999 call from Zaman stating that his friend had been murdered by Anne Corbett. So an investigation commenced at that point. As a result of this, the whole web of lies was untangled in relation to that, and that it transpired that Zaman was at the heart of what had happened to Jimmy Prout. What was evident is that Anne Corbett had taken a lead role in that, and she was able to tell us where Jimmy was, and we were able to recover his body from nearby in a poorly state. And our inquiries resulted in identifying that during the course of the latter part of Jimmy's life, he was subject to a variety of very serious and appalling assaults, including having a testicle removed, including having his teeth removed with a hammer and a chisel, being struck over the head with a bottle, an empty Jack Daniels bottle, and being subject to both physical and emotional abuse at the hands of these individuals.
And how did Zaman try and cover it? Like you say, spun a web of lies?
Yeah, he got the girls to lie for him, particularly Anne Corbett. The idea was that Anne would take responsibility for his actions and actions alone, so that the four of them weren't involved. It was just her and her brother. However, our inquiries quickly revealed that that wasn't correct, and that actually Zaman was at the heart of everything that was going on in both of those houses.
At the end of the trial, Zaman was sentenced to a minimum of 33 years, Corbett to a minimum of 27 years, Rayworth to 12 years and 4 months, and Wood to 9 years. As they were led away, voices from the public gallery shouted, "I hope you fucking rot in hell," and I could not agree more. In the aftermath of the trial, Jimmy's brother Eddie Prout was vocal in his criticism of authorities and wanting to find out exactly what happened to his brother in order to try and find some peace. Eddie said, "I have still got his ashes. After this is all over and done with, I'm going to lay him to rest. He always loved going to North Shields. That's where he spent most of his time, down at the fish quay. He loved watching the fishing boats come in. But I can't lay him to rest until I find out exactly what happened to him. He was let down by a lot of people, by basically everybody that should have been there to help him. Jimmy could have been here today. Jimmy would have been here today." Now, some 7 years on from this horrifically barbaric crime, the domestic homicide review into Jimmy Prout's death has just been released, and it makes for difficult reading for many of the services in this area of northeast England. It details that there were at least 17 occasions within services ahead of the murder where Jimmy Prout could have been helped. The key findings in this report include: there were opportunities when safeguarding alerts could have been made after GP appointments, police interviews and visits to A&E, but no alerts were made, meaning Jimmy did not have contact with social services himself. The perpetrators of the abuse used professional appointments and meetings to reinforce their control over Jimmy, and professionals did not ask to see him alone. The report says it is well documented that perpetrators of domestic abuse control their victims through following them to appointments and insist on attending appointments, and it is therefore best practice to seek to speak to people alone whenever possible. This did not happen, and as a result, Jimmy did not have the opportunity to speak to professionals at any point during the time frame of this review on his own. There was a lack of clarity and urgency in adult safeguarding arrangements, meaning Jimmy was not seen as a potential victim. The safeguarding response does not appear to have been effectively coordinated or overseen at a multi-agency level. There was a confused approach to the implementation of adult protection arrangements. Signs that Jimmy was being abused and exploited were missed as a direct result of the late formation of safeguarding strategy meetings. People are viewed as either perpetrator or victim of abuse. Jimmy was not identified as a possible victim of abuse and exploitation. Jimmy was instead viewed as a perpetrator of domestic abuse, and this obscured Service's ability to see his vulnerabilities and that he was also a victim of abuse and exploitation, the report says. There were indicators Jimmy was an adult at risk of harm. His presentation had deteriorated. He was dirty and dishevelled. He had lost weight. He had lost teeth, and he had visible bruising. Yet despite this, his vulnerability was not recognised. No single agency had a full picture of what was happening in Jimmy's life, and there were several missed opportunities for initiating safeguarding procedures, assessments, or other interventions, and for agencies to share information. Jimmy was not considered vulnerable or at risk of harm, as Services viewed him as a perpetrator of domestic abuse rather than a potential victim. Services were not aware of the impact of trauma. Jimmy was viewed as a man who did not engage with Services, instead of as a man who wanted to engage with Services but was afraid. Jimmy couldn't speak out as he was too afraid of the consequences. Even towards the end of his life, when his physical condition deteriorated, trauma and fear prevented him from speaking out. And professional curiosity was lacking across all agencies. The report makes a number of recommendations to prevent others suffering the same fate as Jimmy. Paul Hanson, Chief Executive of North Tyneside Council, has admitted that it's possible Jimmy could have been protected from his killers. He said, "The people responsible for the hideous murder have been served justice in our courts. The people Jimmy thought were his friends controlled him, manipulated him, and harmed him. They did this in an evil, calculated way, and they knew that the approach they were taking would stop Jimmy getting the help and protection he needed. We welcome the findings of the review, and we have already completed work on the recommendations. I accept that if Services had communicated more frequently through the right channels, a greater picture of Jimmy's life could have been painted. This more complete picture might have provided us with a greater chance to protect Jimmy from the people who murdered him. We will continue to work together to make sure North Tyneside is a safe and caring borough. We will continue to do our best so our communities recognise the warning signs of abuse and controlling behaviour so they can report safeguarding concerns. Please, if you see something, say something. So once again, we are closing the stable door after the horse has bolted. I can only hope that lessons have been learned, because that's all I seem to hear when things go tits up. It's all finger pointing and very little taking accountability. Jimmy Prout was a man generally happy with his lot in life, certainly with difficulties, certainly vulnerable, but with a willingness to help anyone, until he fell in with a cruel, controlling man and some women who inexplicably would do seemingly anything to make him happy. What happened to Jimmy at Zaman's home on St. Stephen's Way in Percy, Maine, North Shields, was obscene, grotesque, and utterly beyond comprehension. I still cannot believe that human beings can be so cruel to another human, especially one who was supposed to be a close friend. Zaman was unquestionably an evil narcissist, and the three women, although brainwashed, must have had evil tendencies to allow the things that took place to actually happen. I can only hope that Zaman is never released, because he is dangerous even just through his influence. This video is dedicated to Jimmy Prout, a vulnerable man who had found his own happiness until some vile people treated him with such disdain and cruelty. I hope he rests in peace, and that his family can find some level of solace knowing that the guilty parties are behind bars. Thank you for watching another episode of Murder of Crows. I'm Steve, this is Samson, and we'll see you when we see you.
Say that you're ready.